Welcome back. It is Sunday sit-down time. I'm here with Andy Humphrey. Andy, it's been a big week for Mizzou sports, pretty much. A lot going on. Let's kick things off starting Dennis Gates, the new chief in town. He has a lot of work to do here at Mizzou, and he's pretty much already started that. What's your take on all of it?
Yeah, pretty interesting how fast it's happened. We see him introduced on Tuesday, and already he lands one of the top JUCO recruits in the country. Now, he probably could have been talking to him beforehand, before he knew right away that he had the Mizzou job. But I mean, that's pretty impressive still, because this is a kid in Mohamed Diarra that's had offers from other Power 5 schools as a 6'10", lanky forward that Mizzou could really use. And so I think seeing that early on, and also getting another transfer from the Horizon League, a guy that Dennis Gates actually coached against the last couple of seasons, could also be pretty interesting. So, it's at least giving Mizzou fans hope, which is what you always want out of these kind of hires. And Dennis Gates already hitting the ground running. So I think it's at least promising signs. We'll just have to see if it translates to results.
Yeah, it's been a tough few past seasons for Mizzou hoops. What does Gates really need to bring to this program to get them back to where they once were?
I'd say the talent. That's the start that he needs, at least, and to be able to get some of that recruiting momentum going would really be one of the things that Mizzou needs the most. Not only to bring that, bring them out of this sort of fan apathy that I think is setting into the program right now, but also to alert some of these other big time recruits that, hey, Mizzou's a place that you can consider, that's a fun place to go. That's kind of the thing that Eli Drinkwitz sort of did with the Mizzou football program. Just made Mizzou like a fun place to go for these top recruits, especially locally. So I think that's what Gates needs to kind of get back to. And then once you get that talent in, how do you pull the best out of those kids? And so I think that's maybe where the last regime sort of fell short, is that, you had some talented kids here and there, but for the most part, it wasn't translating into the best product on the floor. So it's those two things hand in hand, and it's a tough task for any new head coach to try to take on.
Right, now like we said, Gates has brought in some new guys this week, but he's also had some guys enter the transfer portal, which is the big topic everywhere right now. So Pickett and Brazil both in the portal. Do you think there's any chance that they end up coming back to Mizzou?
Well, who knows? I mean, if you're talking about just generally across the board in college basketball and really college sports in general, if you hit the portal, usually you're not coming back. You don't see a whole lot of those kids then all of a sudden decide, oh, wait, I actually do want to come back to my former school. Now, not saying it's impossible, but again, it kind of comes with the territory when you go through a coaching change like this. It's not to say that Trevin Brazil and Javon Pickett were just totally going to decommit no matter what. But I mean, this is kind of what goes with the territory a little bit. And so I think it's up to Dennis Gates now to make the decision of, all right, do I try and keep these guys as much as possible? And if that doesn't work out, how do I supplement that, and how do I make up that kind of production? It's also very interesting to see whether Aiden Shaw will decide to commit back to Mizzou, a kid that was one of the more highly touted recruits that Mizzou had gotten in quite a while, and decided to look elsewhere. So that'll be another key thing to see whether Gates can lock that down again. Who knows? I mean, either way, you have to find a way to make up that production again.
Definitely. Continuing with our transfer portal, we had Asia Blackwell enter the portal also this week, and 3 other of her teammates have entered the portal also. A lot of work there for the women's hoops team.
Yeah, and here's the thing. When you go through a coaching change, then you can expect a few changeovers in the transfer portal, everything like that. But the Mizzou women's team is not doing that. So this is a little bit different. I mean, Asia Blackwell, with how the end of last season kind of went with the suspension and everything like that, you could almost say that LaDasia Williams and Kaya DeRoe, 2 players that also entered the transfer portal for Mizzou, maybe it's related to that. We just don't know all the the details. But I didn't really think it was handled the best way by Robin Pingeton. It's not to say that it's her fault that Asia Blackwell is in the transfer portal at this point. I don't think that's necessarily the case. But one thing is for certain, it's now her problem. So you have to find a way, again, to see where that production is going to come from, whether Mizzou now dips their foot to try and see into that transfer portal and get somebody else that could make up some of that. But in the end, I mean, this is a little bit more troubling because when your top player decides, I actually don't want to finish out my next couple of years here at Mizzou, then that raises a bit of a red flag. So that's something that is going to have to be figured out pretty quickly this offseason of how Mizzou moves forward from that.
Yeah, definitely a lot to do on that front, I feel like, for women's hoops. Transitioning now, we had Pro Day this week. Tyler Beatty was out there along with 13 others of his former teammates. Beatty is the big talk of this offseason and just kind of where he might go in the NFL. Any takes on it?
You know, it's hard to say. I mean, his draft stock, I think, has really elevated over, you'd say the last couple of months of the regular season when, he started breaking the record. He broke the all-time rushing record for Mizzou. And then kind of into these off-season months, he did well at the Senior Bowl. Beg your pardon, not the Pro Day, but the Senior Bowl. Really impressed in those practices. Didn't get to play in the actual game because of injury, but keeping that momentum going with the Pro Day. Now, look, it's just one day. It's one chance for them to showcase what they can do, and it's just one piece of information that all of these NFL scouts get to piece together to say, all right, what's this guy actually going to provide to our team? I think he'll be drafted with the way that things have been moving forward with his momentum recently. I don't know exactly where. And even if he doesn't, I still think this guy's going to find a pretty decent spot on an NFL roster. There's more of an emphasis now to try and find these running backs that can not only take the carries traditionally, but can also split out wide in the passing game and be options for a quarterback when this has become such a passing league in the NFL. So I think Beatty's skill set really does fit well with whatever NFL team wants to take him. So I think he's in a good spot.
Definitely. Moving on to our spring sports now. I told you I was out at the baseball games this weekend. A lot of action, definitely. Yesterday they upset number 3 Arkansas. Today they're putting up a good fight. What's your take on the baseball team this season and what they really need to do to finish things out?
Well, look, I mean, the way that their schedule worked out at the very beginning was pretty unfortunate, taking on probably the 2 best teams in the best conference in all of college baseball in Vanderbilt and Arkansas. So you're obviously going to go through some struggles with that if you were Mizzou. But I think the early portions of this season bring a little bit of hope where they went 12-2 through the non-conference portion there before conference play. And look, in the last couple of years, they haven't been that dominant during that portion of their schedule. So that at least lends to the belief that this team can compete against some of those more talented teams that will make NCAA regionals this year. Look, the SEC baseball is so loaded. So if you are in the middle of the pack in that conference, then you can almost feel pretty good about making an NCAA regional. I don't know if Mizzou is going to make that necessary tier, but games like this and weekends like this definitely lend hope to the belief that they can take down some of these other tough opponents that they'll have in conference play later on this year. So we'll just have to see. I think they're starting to grow into their own a bit.
Yeah, I feel like this weekend has just kind of proved that they're a little underrated, you could say, right?
Maybe so. When they got overlooked a bit last year, and I mean, for good reason, but last year, I mean, they had a series win against Mississippi State, one of the top teams in all of the SEC. And so I think kind of the momentum from that carried a little bit into this year and how they were able to piece together the roster again after some transfers out last season.
Now, a different start now was for Mizzou softball this season. They definitely got off to a hot start, but this weekend was rough. They lost 3 straight games to Ole Miss. What's the take on their team, and what did they kind of need to do? It looked like the bats were struggling a lot this weekend. Yeah,
the bats are really the main thing. And look, they kind of sputtered out a little early in the season. Then they really found their groove when they went to the Mary Nutter Classic. They run-ruled Washington, had some really impressive wins there. Now that they've entered into conference play, play, it started to sputter a little bit more. And I think that's due to the fact that, again, the SEC is so good in softball too. Those pitchers are making the adjustment, and now Mizzou, their lineup in particular, has to then adjust again. What are they doing that's that pitchers have figured out a bit, and now how do you make sure that you're not that you're staying competitive in the strike zone first of all, and that you're not giving those free strikes with the swing and miss. So little less time to get that figured out because you have a shorter conference season in SEC softball. So 5 games in already, Mizzou's still looking for their first win, and that's got to come pretty quick if you want to compete in this conference, because they had their sights set on sort of a similar echelon last year where they were able to not only host a regional but also a super regional. Now that's starting to slip away from them a little bit. I don't know if they'll stay in the top 25 in most of the polls this week, but they definitely are that caliber team. They have all of the talent there and all the tools. So we'll see if the next few weeks lend a little bit more luck to them.
Definitely a busy week. I feel like we're talking all different seasons this week.
Hard to keep up, yeah.
I know. Next week, are you thinking anything big? Any big news?
Whew. I wish. That's what this business is all about. But no, we'll certainly see. I'd love to see the next week or so of this Dennis Gates era with how that momentum might be continuing with the recruiting. So we'll see.
Andy, thank you so much for joining us. We will have more after the break.